So here we go with the Draeger v500. So this is electrically powered, again, powered into, or plug it into a, what color outlet? Red outlet, excellent. And then a 50 PSI hookup. And just FYI, we've made the decision, so anytime with the O2 now, we're going just anything that you would do in the clinical. So if you're gonna hook up the high pressure tubing to oxygen and air, or any equipment up to it, or any devices up to it, go for it just as you would in the hospital. Turn the flow on, utilize it just as you would. Sound good for the oxygen?
No more. Let's pretend we're gonna do it.
Yep. Sound good?
Yes.
Awesome sauce. Okay, so pneumatically powered. It also has a air compressor, but it has to hook up to 50 PSI gas source like O2 and air as well. You see how it's on the patient. This doesn't have, I'm gonna turn it on. Here's the power button. And just talk to you while it's firing up, okay? So you hit that, it takes a moment to come on. But there is no sensory if it's on a patient. So make sure when you're setting this up that you have it off of the patient, someone is bagging the patient, okay? What is the test that we always do prior to putting it on a patient?
SST.
SST. So I encourage you, no matter what ventilator you're working with, to practice SSTs. Get in the habit of it, be familiar with it. Did you have a question?
I was just saying, the SSTs on here, I don't like them because you always feel them because you have to pass the
neonatal flow
yes,
sensor?
yeah.
Yeah, but that's all documented. So if you're not ventilating an adult, it is all logged that you're not ventilating an adult. So that's technically, that would not be like a sentinel event. Because you can't test a neonatal flow sensor because you'll see it plugs in and it comes in and it's actually at the Y. And you'll learn more about that when you get to your specialties. But it's not failing.
Yeah, I know, but like,
I know.
like at work, I would have to stick
I know.
notes on it like it's been tested.
I know, what a
It said
pain.
not complete, like, incomplete or something like that.
Yep. I understand. When you run through the SST, you bypass, because this can ventilate both neonatal, pediatric, and adult populations. However, you have to use a specialized flow sensor. For adults, this is the flow sensor, which I'm going to show you more about. With pediatrics, there's actually one hanging on the back of that. It's a teeny tiny little flow sensor, and it has a wire, and you put it at the Y of the patient, because their little volumes are like 8, 9, 10 mLs. Crazy, right? So speaking of your flow sensor, it is a colossal pain in the butt. All right, I'm gonna pass. This does not go in the trash. Okay, you'll get in big trouble. And if you look up at the light, I'm gonna pass it around. You'll see 2 filaments. They need to be there, so you can't stick anything through. What do you autoclave these?
They clean those.
Do you do it? Are you the
I bring it down to sterile processing.
You take it down.
Clean.
Some places have the actual. Is it an autoclave where you put it in there and you turn it on and it gets to certain temperatures? It kills bacteria.
But
lysis.
the issue is those filaments. Everybody thinks that they shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
That are people that are down at the whatever you take it on.
Sterile processing.
Sterile processing.
Yeah.
And so they clean it so that they get rid of it because they think it's fuzz or something.
Yeah.
And that completely destroys that, and you can no longer use it. And now you got to get a new one that costs like several $100s.
Yeah, these are expensive. Okay, but this comes out. You can take apart the whole expiratory valve and clean that as well. We're not doing that today. You can do that in clinicals, okay? So if you ever have a situation where your waveforms and your values essentially disappear, pressure will still be there, but volume and flow and your exhale tidal volume, minute ventilation, those values will just disappear. It's the flow sensor. I can tell you that right now. You can verify that the patient is being ventilated because the minute ventilation and the FiO2 will pop up here. This is the GUI, the something user interface. What does the G stand for? Something.
I can't. I'll find out.
But this is the GUI, but the actual meat is here. This is what's producing the actual breath. So you'll see it go whoosh, whoosh, every breath they get. So you can verify, but if you ever have an issue like that, take the patient, ask someone to bang them while you troubleshoot the ventilator, okay? So you would take out your flow sensor, make sure the filament is intact, put it back in and calibrate the flow sensor. I'm gonna actually pass it around. So if you wanna take a look at the filament, you know, do it with a sense of urgency so we can keep moving. And I'll show you how to put that back in. Most of the time, if you take it out, put it back in, and the filament is still attached and you calibrate the flow sensor, that will rectify the situation. Okay? And you'll see your values come up, all is well in the world. However, that doesn't work. Try replacing the flow sensor with another one that's been cleaned. That doesn't work. You may have to pull your ventilator from circulation, send it down to biomedical engineering, thank you, and figure out and be like, now it's your problem. No. Bag it, tag it, now it's your problem. Okay, so flow sensor pops right in there. Sorry, and then slides over. Notice right here you have this nickel adapter. You can run nebulizers, not ultrasonic, don't confuse that. This is a nebulizer that requires flow, all right? So what would happen before is you would put a nebulizer in line with the T-piece, hook it to the flow meter, and that would pump so much additional flow, it would like amplify your volumes almost to an unsafe space because the ventilator is not controlling it. What this alleviated is that fluctuation in volume, and you can actually, it's only on inspiration, and you can choose how long to run it for. It's like 5, 10, 15, and then it stops automatically. Okay? So you can run a nebulizer there, flow sensor, expiratory valve. Oh, somebody switched it. I had this on the inspiratory side by accident. And I got yelled at for it. All right, so we'll do a new adult. I have to SST. See, it doesn't even give you an option because you have to SST it into neonatal for it to be an option. All right, very good.
Stacy stands for Graphical User Interface.
Thank you.
It would have bothered me all night.
I know, I'm like gooey.
Stuff like that bothers me.
Because remember when it first popped up and I was like, what is a GUI failure? And the whole screen went blank and we were like, ah! It wasn't this one, it was the 840. So with this ventilator, you can put in the patient's weight here. You can do invasive ventilation. You can do high flow oxygen therapy, which would just be heated inspiratory limb. You can also do non-invasive, where you can run non-invasive ventilation through the ventilator, okay? Humidification, you're gonna choose what type. Is it active, meaning heated with a heated wire circuit? Is it passive, HME? And when you do your SST test, you have to make sure that you're doing it with that selected humidifier. It makes a difference. Make sense? System check. So here's there's two of them on this one. You have your device check, where you would start it. It walks you through it, block the Y, unblock the Y, connect the expiratory, you know. Have you done it before? No? I'm getting nothing. I'm getting like, everybody's looking at the floor. I don't know what's happening. So just when you have downtime, all of the equipment rooms have 50 PSI hookups so that you can troubleshoot your equipment in your equipment room, right? So if you have downtime, be like, hey, can we even if it's not the Draeger, if it's a servo U, guess what? You're gonna learn a servo U. So SST it, go through, start getting familiar with that process. Sound good? And it only takes like 2 minutes. That's it. So you do your device check, and then you also do your circuit check. You're gonna check the compliance of the circuit, the compressible volume, which is lost because of pressure changes. You okay?
He was like recording over there. This is so funny because he didn't know. His phone was like.
Y'all have like file share, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Here's your results. There's no lying about doing an SST. Do you understand? So if something happens with the ventilator and a patient, and they're like, well, did you do the SST? And you're like, yeah, sure, yeah. No, you can check. It's recorded. Okay, so always do your SST. And this has to do with like, you can set, it'll like a countdown, like change your circuit in this many days. I said it before to the class prior, ventilators are like a smartphone. So when you go to get a smartphone, they're like, look, it can do this, it can walk for you, and you're like, do. And you only end up using like 45% of those features, right? Unless you're just like over the top into tech stuff, which is cool. It's kind of the same thing with ventilators. Okay, that's my son's technology teacher. They make you sign up for these Google Classrooms, and then, anyways. All right, so I digress. Anyway, but so there are a ton of features on here that you can use, just like any smartphone or tablet or something like that. But we only end up using about 45% of features, which is okay. It's just sometimes not practical to be able to do all that stuff. But you had said with the studies, you know.
Yeah, that's why they use, I said, like, a lot of the, we had a clinical instructor, that was here, that we actually ended up using all that in research, like Maryland, the larger hospitals tend to do a lot of research with these different modes. And so that's why there's a lot of them on there to kind of like be proactive, and they do studies and they do papers, and then they try to talk to the intensivists and the doctors there in the hospital to use certain modes, and they have to have these theories to back why they should use them. So they are very proactive on that, and that's why these events have those.
Sound good?
Does that make sense?
So you may, if you're at like a smaller community hospital, you may not be activating those capabilities, but if you're maybe doing studies or treating, working with like more outside the box mentality physicians or PAs or nurse practitioners, you may use those. It just depends on your facility. Okie doke? So if you go down here, vent settings, this will bring up, it's in the corner when you're in standby, this will bring up your playground. So right now we're in volume control, assist control. There's like pressure support and CPAP, spontaneous, pressure control with pressure support. This has mandatory minute ventilation on it. Remember we learned about that with volume control, so it'll switch back and forth. Pressure control, CMV, there's SIMV on here, CPAP and volume support, APRV, there's a ton of modes. But something that's cool is that if you hit this up arrow when you're in the mode, there we go, it pulls up information that you can read about the mode right there. Isn't that cool? Okay, so just an option, all right? Remember I talked about auto flow and volume control with this ventilator? So you have your main settings here when you're in assist control, volume control. There's an I time, however, and no flow rate, right? If you go to additional settings, you have the trigger, which you can adjust your flow trigger. And see how I have to confirm it and to get it to go to blue, or what would you call that color?
Green.
Is that like a blue?
It
Aqua?
looks gray to me.
Aquamarine? I don't know. Anyway, so if it's yellow and you go to make a change, you have to confirm it with the knob. Oh my god, that's so sore. All right. Anywho, like hurting so bad. There's a sigh breath here that you can set. Remember, 1.5 times your tidal volume and how many times a minute you want to do it. Auto flow. Right now it's on. When you have auto flow turned on, it delivers the volume, the target volume, with a variable flow rate and the lowest possible pressure. So by having auto flow on in the assist control mode, it mimics close. I think you're on the right path. You just have the wrong acronym. There we go. PRBC. Okay? It's a little bit more comfortable for the patient because of that variable flow. You can turn it off. And I'm going to show you what happens to your main settings. So if you go back to general settings, see how there's now a flow rate? But the thing with that is over here it says T-plat, and you have to make sure you have to turn on your flow until that's as close as it can to 0, which is 34. Kind of low, right? That may not be enough for your patient. So I always advocate for turning your auto flow on. And you do that in additional settings, and you'll find auto flow on. Boom, we're good to go. You have automatic tubing compensation. Remember we had talked about that, okay? You put in the tube if you want it on and off. Is it an ET tube or a trach? Okay. What size is it? How much compensation do you want to go? The percentage. It's all right there. You don't necessarily have to do it in like a control, like a full support mode, like a volume control or pressure control per se. You can. Where I feel like it becomes really important to help the patient is in spontaneous mode. Okay? You know what I mean? Give them a little help. Okay, let's go back. General settings, here we go. I'm gonna start it up, okay? So, start ventilation. But did you notice the whole time it was connected and the vent didn't sense that? That's really important because you gotta make sure if you're done with the ventilator or if you're setting it up, that you only attach it to the patient when the vent is running with your settings that you set. Okay? I'm gonna change this to you for you. We're gonna make a waveform. I'm gonna do volume. All right, very good. Okay. So you have pressure, flow, volume. Okay? If you look over here, this is all of your feedback from your patient. This is your quick settings for your vent settings that you can access. Okay, you also have vent settings over here that you can pull up. All right? Also, here are you have hard keys and soft keys. So hard key, soft keys are your touch screen. All right? Views, there's a couple of different views. Here's your waveforms. I like that one. You have loops in view 2. And all of this can be customized for whatever your institution prefers. But here's your loops. They look pretty good for being on like a test song. And then you have this view here. Resistance and compliance. The thicker the line gets, the worse it is. Okay.
I like that.
I like view 1. I know it's pretty, but like this tells you more. Let's see. You have, here we go, day and night. So if the patient's sleeping, especially babies, you'll learn about this. It's less sensory stimulation by putting it into nighttime at night. You can freeze waveforms. So if you have, I used an example of a doctor I used to work with who didn't like autoflow for some reason, like was like hell bent against autoflow and demanded you chart a flow rate. So I would leave it in autoflow and I would freeze my waveforms and I would go to the very tippy top like that and I would look, it's 40.9. There's your flow rate, sir, madam.
What was the point of that?
It was just them being crazy. I don't know. Sorry.
Because it changes.
Well, they had tried to explain multiple times, and it was in the neuro ICU, which was even worse because typically when there's like some sort of neurological issue, like a bleed, their lungs are normal. So they just want to breathe, not be so restricted. So that was another thing. So we just kept them in autoflow and documented the flow like that.
Huh, that's
Yeah.
odd.
Crazy, huh? And it's like something that's so not in their purview. Like that's in our purview to make the patient more comfortable, like
I mean,
slow.
the flow has no bearing on
No.
anything.
No, I know. Because he was like, no, I guess he was doing calculations possibly.
Okay, well,
That's the only thing I could like really come to with that. Just silly.
it's just not knowing, not understanding the vent.
Yeah. But also I think the worst and the most dangerous people are the ones that don't listen and don't want to learn, you know? Trends, we're not going to have any data. This one's really cool, values, when you're doing a vent check, because it pulls up a ton of information, okay? And you have a bunch of them that you can look at, all right? You can export data for studies. This should do it, you can do it via, what kind of cable is this, HDMI? No, it's probably wrong.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Is it
Like that you plug your phone into this thing?
A port,
USB?
have a port.
USB. Okay.
There you
USB cord.
Who said that?
Christina.
You go, girl.
Some of the ventilators are Bluetooth, and I feel like this should be Bluetooth too to export the data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's going to be really important when you're doing studies. Okay. Where are we at now? Oh, here we go. Special maneuvers. So you have an inspiratory pause, expiratory pause, O2 suction, which will give you 2 minutes of 100%, but remember it silences your alarm, so you have like your disconnect alarms. So you have to make sure before you leave that you turn it off. Okay, you also have the manual disconnect, touch confirm and disconnect within 10 seconds. So what that is, this is a lot more powerful and disgusting when it's actually on a patient. Right? So what happens by doing that, it pauses that for a second so that it doesn't spray all over you. Okay? Make sense? It's
Is
good
that
stuff.
for, like, if you're changing out the circuit or something, or?
Yeah, if you're disconnecting to go to a travel ventilator, if you have to disconnect a bag suction,
You'll understand when it happens to you.
right in your face.
You
Well, like
won't
COVID's
remember
over.
it, but when it happens to, like it's happened to me. So, and the
And you're like
person
in your
had,
mouth.
like, the person's lab hadn't come back, and then they came back positive or something, then I had to go back in and start
Yeah.
a regimen of care.
Yeah.
So, you'll care when you'll understand that little feature.
It'll kind of
Really
fit
quick.
into, I have like a motto that I always tell my children for when they fall. I'm always like, protect the moneymaker. So, always protect the moneymaker. Number one rule. So that's one way to do that, okay? Very good. Nebulizer. So, this is where you would hook up your nebulizer and it has the minutes. 5, 10, 15. Super easy, it's very quiet, and it's only on inspiration. Okay? This is all stuff that you're not going to use. Transport. You can transport with this ventilator. That is a reason we don't necessarily plug in our ventilators when we're not using them because it uses a lot of power. In the hospital, they're all plugged in. Most importantly, if they have to be transported, they have a full battery ready to go. Okay? But this notifies the ventilator that you're transporting. Let me see here. So that's special, and then you have, in addition to special maneuvers and all that listed there to get your plateau pressure, your auto PEEP, it's listed below too. So you can access it here as well. Nebulization, O2 suction, manual disconnect, and inspiratory hold. Cool? All right, alarms. So you have your minute ventilation alarm. You have a minute ventilation delay, which is essentially kind of a timed alarm that we set around 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds for that. High pressure alarm. How do we set a high pressure alarm in volume control? Let's see if you're more awake than your constituents.
10 to 15 above.
Here we go. See? 10 to 15 above what?
Pep.
Good. What about in pressure control? How do we set our high pressure alarm?
5 above.
5 above your...
It's the afternoon.
Ah!
You're all woke
You got
up
more
and had
sleep.
your coffee.
5 above your set PIP, okay? You have a respiratory rate alarm, which is 3 times, or 10 to 15 above. And then your tidal volume. And how do we set a tidal volume alarm? 1 to 200 above. Notice this one doesn't have several low alarms, but you still have to know how to set them. Okay? So that's how we access alarms. Again, vent settings, they're down here. You can click up here and it'll bring them up, and you can click here and it'll bring them up. There's several options, okay? Trigger. This was accessible in your vent settings, but you can also access it here if you need to change, hey, the sensitivity. Happy Friday!
Have you heard from Henry?
Friday.
Have you heard from Henry?
No, nothing.
We'll just send out some good vibes. Yeah, we're waiting. We're like trying to like just give some space to, and but we'll keep you posted, okay? Sensors and parameters. Remember how I said the flow sensor will probably inevitably give you issues? Don't panic, okay? Just lift it up, take it out, put it back in, and then you hit start calibration, confirm. It takes literally like 5 seconds. And it'll say calibration of flow sensor successful. You can also adjust your O2 sensor to be on or off for monitoring. We're always going to keep it on, right? Okay. System help. System setup. So a lot of this is going to be locked. It's a configuration of how the ventilator is set up. When you see a key password like this, that's typically meant for Biomed's eyes and fingers, okay? Lots of different. Okay, do you see how a lot of it, all right, help. Oh shoot. You can, so you have an automatic when you go into system setup, you can switch automatically from day to night and program in a time. You can adjust the brightness, the dimming. Where's it at? So screen layout, see how there's 2 columns? You can customize that. Okay? See? Where's the language? Shoot. Was it here?
It's not under special, is
How did I lose it? Doesn't help being on the side of it. Alarms, ventilation, screen layout.
it? But you don't wanna change.
No, I'm just like, where did it go though? There's a place in here where you can adjust the language, the country, the time. My brain is just failing me right now, I apologize. It's in the manual. Refer to the manual. And then,
We'll find, she'll find it.
yeah,
after.
I will, I just,
When she's
and then
looking at it straight on.
here is, if you go into help, a ton of links. See all these links that you can refer to in addition to the manual. So it does have a lot of information on here, okay? To go to start and standby, you have to hit start standby, click, it's gonna alarm again to be like, are you sure you don't wanna kill your patient? Hit yes, I'm sure, hit it again, cause watch. Nothing. Nothing. Thank you. See, the ventilator doesn't recognize it, so be very careful about that. You have to disconnect and either reconnect to whatever you're doing or bag or whatever, okay? Any questions? It's not too bad, right? That's gonna,
Packaged differently.
it's gonna drive me nuts about the language. I'll find it. All right, so that's it for the Draeger. So what we're gonna